You know what annoys me when I talk about comic books and I notice that there are ASMR channels getting more views than my comic book videos. I mean, seriously, I wake up during the night from nightmares covered in sweat with the philosophical questions in my brain going, how is this woman making puckered lips into the microphone, managing to captivate an audience far better than I do when I talk about comic books? As such, I want to fulfill my New Year's resolution by releasing the best video about comic books I have ever released on my channel, ever. And to make sure that this is going to be popular, I need to make it so that even people who do not read or are into comic book culture can appreciate the knowledge, the fountain of wisdom that I'm going to give to you here. You're going to have people sharing this video around, like, here, John, here is wisdom. And you're going to click the link and it's going to be a squeaky Romanian lecturing to you about the sad state of entertainment in the West. Because it is sad. Marvel and DC Comics, which are the juggernauts of the comic book industry, companies that people even outside of the United States can know and recognize, are not doing very well. And you don't need to be an economist to figure that out. Just look at the number of comic books they cancel every month, and you will notice that people just simply aren't reading their comics. And you might say that maybe people just have moved away from the medium. But that's not true, because a lot of people are reading manga, and when you have independent comic book artists that decides to stop working with DC, they manage to rack up millions of dollars from Kickstarter just for one comic book issue. So clearly there are people just wanting their money to be taken away by DC and Marvel, but DC and Marvel just refuse to take it by providing comics that are really not interesting for the audience. And I think the first meme of the decade, the first meme that was trending on Twitter, can really enlighten us to why this is. The new guy meme is done by a very progressive person, which accidentally highlights the issues not only in the comic book industry, but also in various TV shows and movies. Besides the art style, which is quite bad compared to what a Japanese person can do with a crayon, we notice that the main character is a self-insert. It is basically a prop for the artist to push its ideology towards the reader. And we notice that the artist here, the self-insert, goes like, hey, 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 looking at her phone. And this new guy, which is supposed to be the villain, and you can see by the way he is drawn, he is a bald guy, he is a fat guy, he is very unattractive, unappealing in contrast to the way that the self-insert looks. And the new guys say, what's so funny? Hey, that millionaire gamer bro douchebag totally got robbed. He 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 he. So we can notice that the self-insert is a scumbag. They are taking joy into the misery of other people. The way they enrich their life is to see other people suffering, people who never directly hurt them in any way. So the new guy says, how would you like it if you were robbed? So the new guy is promoting universal human values. He is coming from a Western way of thinking where you highlight the individual more than the collective, more than the group. And you're saying, how would you like it if this was done to you? Because if you wouldn't like it when it's done to you, then why are you enjoying it when someone else is suffering from that? And the answer is a very sarcastic, very snarky, Twitter blue checkmark way of responding to things. It's like, oh wow, I can tell we're going to be the kind of coworkers who become friends. And the new guy is like happy that he made a friend, to which she responds like, no. So what is going on here is that she is not part of universal human values. She is part of group values. In other words, she despises the rich. She despises the wealthy. It doesn't matter that PewDiePie, the person who she is talking about, managed to get his wealth in a very honest way, in a very inspirational way, I would say, because it highlights that if you are passionate about something, even you, a random person, could start a YouTube channel, and if you have what it takes, if you keep at it long enough and you manage to put your heart and soul into it, you can become rich. Doesn't mean you're going to become rich as PewDiePie, But certainly you can do something with your life if you follow your passion. But this person doesn't believe that. She hates PewDiePie just because he is wealthy. And what goes to show is the reason why Eastern European countries compare communism with Nazism. Because the reason Nazis hated Jewish people is because, according to them, they were in positions of power, they didn't identify with the German collective, and they were working against the nation's interest, against the interest of the many. Now, communists hated the wealthy, they hated the aristocracy because they believed they don't identify with the collective of the many, and they are also following their own self-interests, and they're not looking for the greater community, the greater good. So basically, while Nazism genocides people based on ethnicity, communism genocides people based on class and class affiliation. I recommend people read this book, The Harvest of Sorrows, in which it described the persecution of the clergy and the aristocracy in Russia during the Communist Revolution. Now, once they finished murdering all of the clergy and all of the aristocrats, they started moving towards people associated or affiliated with them. If you had a friend that was an aristocrat and you used to visit them quite often, well, now you were in the crosshairs. What also is interesting is the way they persecuted the engineers, because the engineers were also considered to be the intelligentsia, part of the intellectual elites, but unfortunately they also needed them. So there were cases where engineers were placed into the gulags, and then they were released from the gulags in order to complete some project, and then they were locked back up again. It's only when Stalin came into power that the persecution of the engineers actually started. It's a really great book, and you're going to find a lot of horrors from the Soviet Union. Also, once they finally got rid of the aristocrats and the wealthy, they had to blame someone else, and they decided to blame the kulaks. And even people who weren't kulaks were also genocided by the compassionate left, because this ideology goes against universal values. This ideology of social justice, it says that these people deserve whatever is coming to them, because all of the societal ills, everything that's wrong in society, is because of this group or this class of people. And if something that's awful happens to them, it's like cosmic justice. It's good that PewDiePie got robbed, according to these people, because he deserves it. He has money, and because PewDiePie got robbed, now someone less poor than him has a redistribution of wealth. Okay, let's think for a bit. What made Superman so popular around the world and around different cultures? As described by the initial author who came up with the concept of Superman, he stands for truth, justice, and the American way. It's very important to mention the fact that he stands for the American way as perceived by the artist at the time. He doesn't stand for the Pakistani way, he doesn't stand for the Chinese way, he doesn't stand for anything but the American way, which was considered to be good. So people who are patriotic and American could find their values reflected into Superman. Now, the patriotic people in America vastly overwhelmed the unpatriotic people. So what this goes to show is that the fact that the comic book industry isn't selling is that most of the people that are part of this ideology, where it's okay if some groups of people, even if innocent, have bad things happen to them, aren't the majority of people in the United States. Because if they were, these comic books would be massively popular. They would be massively successful. And the fact that they aren't highlight to these people that they are a very vocal minority with connection to the mainstream media and with connection to activist group that can ruin lives if people go against them. They can censor, they can get you fired, which is why most people are afraid to talk against them. But because they can't get people to pay for their ideology, to pay for their comic books, to pay for whatever they put out, goes to show that they do not have the majority of people on their side. And this also shows when the elections are coming, like we saw in the United Kingdom, like we're going to see in the United States soon. They are a vocal, very loud minority of people. And when I say they, I mean people that are into social justice. Because what ended up happening is that DC and Marvel started replacing their talent with more and more social justice activists who are now taking over the previous characters like Superman, like Wonder Woman, like all of these characters that have been done in the past with a certain morality in mind, and they're now injecting them with social justice morality. So, what is social justice morality? Well, author G. Willow Wilson explains it to us. She said in one of her talks at a university that the way, let's say, Daredevil used to operate was that if he saw someone getting mugged, he would immediately intervene and stop the mugging. And if possible, he would take the mugger to the police station while giving the victim her belongings back. But that is not the way G. Willow Wilson likes to write characters anymore. The way they like to write characters is by having the superhero, so Daredevil in this situation, think before he intervenes in a crime. He has to think about the groups of people involved and the scale of oppression that different groups of people follow, and then he has to consider if his intervention is actually going to do any good in the world. So in the case of, let's say, a fictional PewDiePie, a fictional gamer dude bro getting mugged by a couple of people, Daredevil will have to consider how rich the person getting mugged is, who is doing the mugging, and how oppressed their groups are. And if the answer is that the group of people robbing Daredevil are very oppressed and very unprivileged, he can allow the robbing to go. Now, for most people, not only in America but outside the world, this would be considered an act of injustice. You would not be able to say that Daredevil is a superhero at this point. And this is what social justice thinks a superhero is like. Now, let me tell you a couple of short stories that I have seen in comics during the last years, stories that I found absolutely abhorrent. But this is what these new writers consider to be people that you should look up to. One of the people in question is Miss Marvel. She had created a task force to arrest people that haven't committed crimes yet, but she knows that they will commit crimes in the future. So what crimes would warranted being stopped before they happen? Maybe the villain is someone that's going to commit mass genocide, start a war between two nations, maybe launch a nuclear strike and kill millions. No, the villain in question seems to be a high school kid that has been rejected by his girlfriend and decided to mess with the electrical wiring at that high school and start a fire. So what happens is that the superhero, quote unquote, Miss Marvel, breaks into his house. His parents are terrified. They don't know what's going on. And their parents are being pushed out of the way because they need to arrest his kid. With no warrant, the kid hasn't done anything yet. And apparently Miss Marvel, which is the superhero, doesn't intervene. Like they look like this is justice. This is the correct way of doing things, barging into an American's home without any warrant, arresting their son because he might commit something. You can see how terrified they are. Like, I'm calling the police, and they say, your son is going to have to come with us. He's a threat to public safety. Obviously, like, they trash this guy's house, they electrocute him. Like, remember, he hasn't committed any crime, but we know he will. And he gets placed without any trial and without any way of appealing this decision in a solitary confinement prison guarded by female officers, as it seems, with batons walking around, and every one of them is placed into this solitary confinement cell, which looks beyond inhumane. I mean, even normal prisons would have a yard or place where the inmates could socialize, but they are treating this guy as if he is the worst of the worst and he hasn't even committed a crime. And also, it's really easy to take apart the idiocy of this, because if everyone is placed into these cubicles, then why do you need so many guards, like 3 or 4 people patrolling the hallway? And you notice that the guards are either white women or minority people, and the prisoners, most of them are white dudes, obviously symbolizing who the good guys are. And you might think, well, maybe this is a moral here, you know, like maybe you're not supposed to take the side of Miss Marvel? And the answer is that yes, there is a moral. Like obviously, the moral is that the fact that Miss Marvel is conflicted over this situation is not because they just broke into someone's house, damaged their property, arrested their son without any sort of trial, and locked him up in a secure facility. No, the morality is that he happened to be her friend. And I guess like what the author is trying to tell the reader is that social justice comes above friendship. Like you're going to have to do hard things and not get attached to people very much, because any person can be a bad person. So you need to put your friendship aside and do what's right. In this case, arrest the individual. I guess at this point you notice why comics don't sell anymore, because the majority of the population does not think that this is heroic. They do not agree that these superheroes are even superheroes anymore. They're just mouthpieces for the artist in question or the person writing the comic book. And the morality that they try to preach to the rest of the population does not resonate at all. Most people reading this think that this is horrible. Like, put yourself into the shoes of the parents and imagine how it would be like a group of thugs going into your house and kidnapping your kid without any trial, without any sort of information over what happened. And these types of stories are a dime a dozen in the comic book industry. I remember reading one about a new team of superheroes that Marvel was hyping up, and they were trying to fight and also have social justice in mind. So they found a villain that was creating blizzards around the globe in order to blackmail the government officials to give him money to make the weather stop being awful. And eventually they have this conversation whether they need to stop this guy or not, because apparently his blizzards are helping with the global warming. So when the real heroes come in to battle this villain, our group of heroes actually plays themselves between the villain and the new hero, saying that no, they're wrong because this guy needs to be allowed to do his thing, even though what he is doing is criminal and what he is doing is wrong. He is fighting against global warming, so that's a good thing. And it's this way of thinking, it's the core of social justice, the principles that the overwhelming amount of people simply find, well, evil. Because they don't believe that there are certain actions which are wrong. They just believe that there are people who deserve it and people who don't. And the people who deserve it, the basket of deplorables, anything that happens to them is a good thing. While the people who don't deserve it, the people that should be protected, any sort of inconvenience, even minor slights, need to be punished. So here is an example from the real world. And if you follow the news, you're going to notice similar examples and patterns and basically way of thinking that are not only wrong, but they're just absolutely evil. So we have the case of a black person getting shot by a police officer because the police officer asked that the black guy drops the weapon, but he didn't. So this ended up with a shooting. Now, the shooting caused a massive protest in Milwaukee, and the protest ended up with cars being burned down, stores being vandalized. So it's not like they protested against, I guess, the mayor or the police station or anything like that. No, they decided to hurt individuals, like other black citizens who had nothing to do with this shooting. And in fact, they probably protested against the shooting as well. And after this happened, you have a lady on CNN saying burning down shit ain't going to help nothing. You all burning down shit we need in our community. And it's interesting that this is the only line CNN decided to air, and they didn't air the rest, saying, take that shit to the suburbs. Burn that shit down. We need our shit. We need our weaves. I don't wear it, but we need it. So in other words, don't, like, the action of burning shit, of hurting individuals isn't the problem. The problem is that you are doing it to the wrong group of people. You need to do it to the other group of people. And CNN, knowingly that most Americans and most people that would hear this would frown and they would find this to be evil and just not the correct way of thinking, they decided to cut that part out. But what happens is that I think the people working at CNN aren't complete social justice lunatics. While they do push a social justice agenda, they understand what they are doing. They understand how the public thinks. The people working at Marvel and DC Comics don't seem to get the memo. They seem to be in their little echo chamber, blocking everyone that disagrees, and only having a group of people that 100% agree with them. So they radicalize themselves, they manage to escalate their ideology, and when it gets contact with the real world, they get a massive pushback and people just don't agree with the arguments that they are making. So going back to the new guy meme, you can notice how bewildered the artist is when she notices that she's getting pushback. And she's not even being insulted, her as a person, is the fact that people are siding with the new guy that is abhorrent to her. She just doesn't understand why the villain that she created is actually considered the hero, while the self-insert character, the heroine of this story, is actually considered the villain. So she lashes out now at the fans, which is something that if you follow game developers, if you follow people from Marvel or DC, you will notice that they do this with a regular basis. When the product that they put out, when the comic books that they put out are being rejected by the people, when people are siding with the villains rather than the heroes, they get very angry and very upset. So they decide to insult their fans. Like in this case, she says that her mentions are fucked and having a bunch of piss babies call me ugly and horrible for the next few days is going to be a thing. So instead of self-reflection, instead of asking why are people siding with the guy that I created as a villain, like there's so many of them, are they all wrong? No, the question is yes, they are all wrong. And in fact, they're not only wrong, but they're also piss babies. They're the evil people of society, and they just don't understand why people are siding with the new guy. It's like, he's such a moral person, the next Jesus, really. Like, they just can't compute. It's like, why can't people just side with the self-insert character that I made the hero? Why are they siding with the villain? And this is where you have a conflict of morality. The type of person that cares about the individual and thinks, if I don't like something done to me and I think it's wrong, why would you do it to other people? Versus the morality of groups thinking. It's like, these are the groups that deserve bad things to happen to them, and any bad thing can happen to them and we won't care. And these are the groups of people that we have to protect. These are the groups of people that even the smallest slight, the smallest insult that is being done to them is an atrocity. And people going into the timeline of this artist and finding comic books such as these doesn't show that the artist is a hypocrite. No, you're just exposing the way social justice activists think. So, for example, you have this comic where this guy, now being the evil person, is like, I am so sick of all this politically correct bullshit. Look at this. Do we really need content warnings for pictures of food? Maybe it helps those who struggle with eating disorders. Well, fuck that. I'm not going to coddle anyone. So, the overwhelming majority of people are thinking of the principle. If we were to have content warning for pictures of food, then any sort of person that has any sort of slight or any sort of disorder would have to be coddled by society to the point where you would live in clown world, where every single video would have content warnings for various things, where every single product would just have like a huge list of content warnings just because the person might have some sort of disability. It would be a ridiculous society to live in. But again, in the social justice mindset, fat people are part of a protected class, and any sort of slight, any sort of minor inconvenience for them is an injustice. And as such, the rest of society, 99.9% of society, needs to change and to work together in order to make the life of the protected person much better. The protected person doesn't have any sort of duty to improve their own life or to take any sort of necessary precautions themselves. This again shows when they talk about censorship on the internet. It's not the person that's offended that has a duty to mute or block the person. No, it is the duty of everyone else, including the social platform, to ban and get rid of any other sort of person that is doing inconveniencing things to the protected class. So for example, if you have a person that is abusive, an abusive gamer, if he's being abusive towards other men, that is no problem. It's fine. Like Boogie getting abused or Toll Biscuit getting abused, that's fine. But the moment that abuse is directed to a woman that has the correct politics, then it's a crime. Then it's something that we as a society need to be better and improve. But going back to this comic, she's saying that no one is forcing you to use content warnings. But what's with the resentment towards this that is simply being considerate of other people's feelings? And this is a straw man saying, I hate other people's feelings. And she says, and there we have it, folks. So already the artist assumes that the people reading this are also politically on the same line with her. And this is some major exposure. It's like, ha, see, I told you. This everyone agrees that this is bad, right? Everyone. Except that if you were to use your thinking a little bit, you would realize that you can't care about anyone's feelings. If you have a debate like between religious people, Muslims that are pro-life, and a person that is pro-choice, no matter which side you take, you are going to hurt someone's feelings. If you side with the Muslim, you are going to hurt the feelings of the pro-choice person. If you side with the pro-choice person, you are going to hurt the feelings of Allah. And if you decide not to side with anyone, then you are hurting the feelings of the activist, because if you're not with them, you're against them. So this is an unrealistic principle that you are trying to do. But it is heavily implied by social justice that you need to side with the feelings of people that have the correct opinions. And honest to God, I am willing to bet money that if these people were back in time and Hitler would have been for trans rights, these people wouldn't criticize Hitler because he had the correct politics. And he would be like, how dare you insult his feelings? I want to make this experiment so bad, you know, like just brainwash a person, put them back in time, and see if Hitler would say, I am for trans rights, if these people would side with him or not. Because here is the evidence. Like here we can finally reveal the principle behind this ideology. In another comic from the same artist, who, remember, said that it's important to care about other people's feelings. That is the moral. We have this comic saying, that'll be $25, so what you up to? Anything good today? Just getting a drink with my girlfriend. Oh, hey, I'm gay too. So where are you and your girlfriend going? No, wait, I'm not gay. My friend who's a girl and I are just having a ladies' night with margaritas at Chili's. Okay, well, sorry, but that is infinitely less interesting to me. So, because this person doesn't have the correct politics, because this person isn't part of the protected class, it's infinitely less interesting. So all of a sudden, we don't care about the feelings anymore. Because this is not about caring about feelings, it's about carrying the people they want to claim as the ones they protect. And the reason they protect people is not out of kindness or empathy. The reason they protect people is that the moment they choose a group of people they want to protect, let's say, I don't know, black people, they will infantilize the protected group to the point where the protected group would be unable to speak for themselves, unable to defend themselves, and all of their actions can't be condemned because of societal woes. So it's almost like they treat the groups they protect like children. And then they become the stewards of the protected groups. So that whenever they say something on Twitter, everyone claps and everyone is happy because look what a progressive and virtuous person you are for speaking out for this. And if you contradict the person that is the steward of a minority group or a protected class, then you're not going against the speaker, you're going against the whole class as a whole. So it's really about grabbing power. It's really about, in the case of Marvel writer J. Willow Wilson, it's about the fact that she's now a Muslim and she is speaking for all Muslims in her comics. And if you don't like her comics, you're actually hating on, I guess, the Muslim community. So let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about the arguments. I think I managed to explain why comic books aren't selling. It's because they are changing the morality of superheroes to something unrecognizable by the overwhelming majority of people who read comics. People do not think this way. People do not think about pitting groups against each other and tactics being perfectly okay if done to the groups that you hate. Most people identified with Superman. Most people think like, how would you like it if this was done to you? How would you like it if this bad situation were to happen to you? And wouldn't it be nice if you had the Superman to save you from the bad situation. But I guess in this situation, Miss Marvel would never save me because I guess I don't fit into the right group of people. So if she were to see me getting mugged on the street, she wouldn't intervene because this would be some social justice redistribution of wealth, and I deserve to be mugged. And finally, the reason that these comic book writers and these artists get so livid when people disagree with their comics or don't absorb the correct message that the comic is trying to put out, and they start barring the doors and locking the windows to their Twitter, basically blocking and muting everyone that disagrees, is because most people look at it through their own way. They're not creating entertainment anymore. In fact, they make this obviously clear in articles such as games aren't there to be fun or comic books shouldn't be fun. It's not something that someone who comes from a hard day at school should just sit down and enjoy anymore. They treat it the same way Christians used to treat chick flicks. Basically those black and white small pamphlets that would have Jesus tell you a story of morality. So when you disagree with the message, when you disagree with the heroes that they create, like Miss Marvel, what you are doing is the equivalent of pissing on the Gospel of Luke. You are telling them that their entire worldview is wrong and that the way that they think good things aren't the way that you think good things are. And this is why they get so livid. This is why they treat the consumer as a necessary evil. And I have noticed DC trying to completely bypass the consumer. Same with Marvel. It drove my attention when a comic book that they remade called Superman Smashes the KKK, which is supposed to be a remake of a very old and good comic. It's not really like that. Like, the story is completely rewritten. The morality is that if you're for legal immigration and border control, then you're just like the KKK. Like, they have remade a couple of interesting tidbits, but we're not going to go into that. What really got my attention is the fact that the author says this comic is for teenagers. I would argue that this comic is actually for children because Superman is not actually the main character of the story. The main character of the story is an immigrant Chinese girl, and what's interesting about it is that if you know about writing comic books and writing stuff for kids, the main hero should be a couple of years older than the target audience that you have. They also changed like the morality here. It's like Superman emphasizes more with the Chinese girl because he's an immigrant. Like, he's not emphasizing with the rest of America anymore. He's not for the American way. He is for, progressive values. It's fine. It's like, whatever. If that's your boat, if you want to read the comic, that's fine. The thing that really drove my attention is that it costs $7.99. And I was like, hold on a little bit. Like, what kid is going to spend $7.99 on a comic book in a world where you have tablets, you have video games, and you have DLC? Like, when I was a kid, I would never have $7.99 in my pocket. But even if I would, like, I wouldn't go and buy a comic book with it. And there's two ways of looking at these things. It's either like the entire company has gotten completely nuts and they want to go bankrupt. Like, who is going to pay $7.99 for a comic? Or you can actually listen to what the author says on TEDx Talks, and you're going to find out that the way they want to sell the comic is through other social justice activists which happen to work in libraries and in public schools. So they inflate the price of this comic, and with the connections from libraries and public schools, they're going to purchase these and just bypass the consumer. In other words, all of these social justice chick flicks that you disagree with on Twitter are not going to be made with your taxpayer money. How's that for a new year? Holy smokes, you got through the whole video. 34 minutes of it. Can you imagine listening to a squeaky Romanian for all this time? I want to give you my thanks. And if you really like this video, please consider sharing, because the YouTube algorithm is prioritizing authoritative sources, which clearly I am not. And if you really like the video, then consider subscribing to my other channel where I make live streams. And also donating to my Subscribe Star. It would really help me a lot. Let me know what you think in the comment sections, and I'll see you guys on the live stream today. I believe it's going to be in around 4 hours.